Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Pod.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party. On today's show, don't worry darlings, we will be dining out on the discourse surrounding one of this year's most talked about films, Don't Worry Darling. Plus, we were going to freak out at Moonage Daydream. I'm a co-host Dallas King, and with me as always is the Olivia Tame to my Olivia Wilde. It's Lee Hutchison. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm looking forward to seeing how this conversation flows.
Indeed. There will be much talk of misflow, I am sure. Because, in Don't Worry Darling, Chris Pine's character, the mysterious Frank, says, what is the opposite of progress? Chaos. Chaos, an ugly word. But the word that I think would very aptly describe the the PR surrounding the release of the new film from Olivia Wilde, Don't Worry Darling. I'm going to give you the plot synopsis. In the 1950s, Alice and Jack live in the idealized community of Victory, an experimental company town that houses the men that work in a top-secret project. While the husbands toil away, the wives get to enjoy the beauty, luxury, and debauchery of their seemingly perfect paradise. However, when cracks in her idyllic life begin to appear, exposing flashes of something sinister lurking below the surface, Alice can't help but question exactly what she's doing in Victory. As I said, the new film from Olivia Wilde. We are going to, review the film, which I'm not sure if many people actually have done in the end, because I think this film has had more gossip column inches than any film that I can actually really remember, certainly this year anyway. And it's not actually been anything to do with the actual film itself. It's all been to do with the events surrounding the film. I mean, I don't think anyone really would have thought when, I think all the way back in, I think it was 2019, when Olivia Wilde signalled that she was going to follow up her, critical smash hit Booksmart with Don't Worry Darling, that anything like this would have happened. But along the way, various twists and turns, we've had the firing of lead actor Shia LaBeouf for the reasons that he had some trouble going on in his private life at the time, and Olivia Wilde said that she had a no asshole policy on her set. Then he was replaced with Harry Styles. There were rumours going around that the leading man and the director might have been on friendlier terms than one would have expected, much to the chagrin of the leading actress, who potentially had to step in at times and take over direction of the film. Then following the film's completion, at the first sort of public outing of the trailer, the director was served with divorce papers from her soon-to-be ex-husband at the time. And then, of course, we had the Venice Film Festival. Yes, the Venice Film Festival, which I was there, but sadly not on that day, where Miss Flo indeed turned up for her one contractual red carpet. She didn't turn up for the press conference. Olivia Wilde said it's a shame, she's filming June. She wouldn't be able to make it in time, as Miss Flo then dropped a Instagram post of her enjoying an Aperol Spritz in Venice at that exact same time. And then, they had the red carpet where everyone sort of stood and smiled and waved politely, followed quickly by Spitgate, where Harry Styles had apparently spat on Chris Pine in the auditorium at the Venice Film Festival, down to sort of slow motion breakdowns of what it could have potentially have been. I mean, Lee, I guess my question is, were you looking forward to the film before, or were you just completely blasé to it, thanks to all this extracurricular activity surrounding the film?
It's been quite a while since I think it was first announced, and I remember being really quite keen on the film. Obviously we're fans of Florence Pugh on this, Chris Pine. It's not a surprise that I'm a fan of his work. He's previously been on this podcast ever so briefly as well. Olivia Wilde's follow-up to Booksmart, which I loved. I know it's become a bit fashionable to be a bit more critical of it, but that was a fantastic film. So yeah, I was really much.
I hadn't realised there was was an anti-Booksmart backlash growing on the back of everything.
Yeah, it was all that kind of classic stuff. So yeah, I was kind of looking forward to this one, and I'd sort of just, truth be told, forgotten all about it. And then sort of in the kind of past few months, it feels like it's been a long trailer campaign for it as well, and I'd sort of forgotten Harry Styles was going to be in it. And then, I'm not one to get involved in sort of movie gossip or things like that, but it's been impossible not to watch this train wreck happening in real time. And yeah, it certainly caught my attention of like, well, I'm definitely going to have to see this film. I mean, obviously the reviews were, not great, and then even some of the reviews sort of defending it or trying to perhaps put a bit more of a positive spin on it, we're still very much down the middle as well. So yeah, it was one where I went into it yesterday kind of just like, I have a feeling this isn't going to be perhaps great, but it might be interesting. There might be something to take from it, or it could be one of those so bad it's good experiences. But the reality was it just wasn't a very good or engaging movie. I found it, for all this drama behind it, it was just sort of a very handed, quite boring drama, I thought.
Okay, because yes, I mean, there's a sort of hinted there in the intro and stuff like that there was so much written about the off-screen antics and the making of, and all that sort of trouble, that when it actually got to the reviews dropping after the Venice Film Festival premiere, they seemed to be almost sort of forgotten in an instant. And it was interesting to go into this. So people had done that thing, which I think I really try not to do when going to see a film and stuff like that. But people seem to go in with their minds already made up that this film was going to be terrible. It was going to be, surely with everything that had gone on around it, it could not be a good film. And, the internet probably would have exploded if it had been. For me as well, I think it was certainly not the disaster that everyone was making out. I think if I was a member of Joe Public who was not on film Twitter and cared not a jot about all the sort of tabloid gossip, I would not have known that there was anything untoward or troublesome happening on the set. I think, it's a film which looks amazing. I think Olivia Wilde had clearly surrounded herself with very talented people, such as, Matthew Libatek, who did the cinematography. John Powell's score, I think, is one of the strongest elements of the film. You had amazing costume design, production design, and stuff like that. It looked fantastic. But I guess similar to what the plot develops, once you actually start to sort of scratch away under the surface, that's when the problems sort of come in. But I mean, I think the one thing that came out of the film, I think, without any sort of scars or whatever, was the performance of Florence Pugh. I think she's, she has been one of the best actresses for the last several years, and this proves that she can do anything. And I mean, apart from Chris Pine, I don't think there was anyone else on that set who could match her in terms of a performance. I mean, let's talk about Florence, I guess. Miss Flo, as she was dubbed at one point. I mean, what did you make of her performance in the film?
I thought she was I thought she was pretty good. I think ultimately it wears a bit thin, over the course of the runtime. And what I feel is like a huge missed opportunity for me was that sort of dynamic between her and kind of Chris Pine's character, this sort of charismatic Frank. He's this founder of the Victory Project. We see him in moments here and there kind of throughout the film, but he's a bit more of a background presence. And I thought one of the real highlights of the film, and I thought, oh, here we go, here's the pivot of the movie. We're going from a pretty mediocre movie to something pretty good at this point, was there's a great dinner party scene where both Alice and Frank are like sort of the bookends of the table, kind of facing off against each other. Alice is really kind of bringing him to task, sort of trying to crumble this empire that he's built up, and watching him sort of bounce off her. He's sort of just told her, I've been waiting for someone like you to come in and challenge me, and we see that challenge unfolding very much in real time over the dinner table. And that's that the core of that movie is much more interesting and appealing to me than perhaps a lot of Alice sort of just kind of dealing with a lot of this on her own and sort of crying to friends, having sort of her relationship issues off the back of that. That stuff was fine, but for an over 2-hour movie, that it does wear a little bit thin, whereas that dynamic between the two is when the film was at its strongest. And I was kind of really disappointed it was so fleeting, because that was the sign of a good film for me. I wanted more of that relationship.
Yeah, I think one of the issues of the film is I think it's 2 hours and 2 runtime, and I mean, many of the reviews have said that the film kind of falls apart in the third act, but for me the third act is incredibly rushed. It feels like it's all over in sort of 10 minutes, whereas I think you see that dinner sequence with Frank is the turning point in the film, and I think if that had come maybe slightly earlier in the film, and had a sort of more exploration of that in the third act, then the film would have been better for it. When this is a film which will require a spoiler discussion, so there will be a section where we have to go into it, because it's impossible to talk about the film without sort of talking about the ending as well. I mean, this is a world where everything seems too good to be true, and as they say, if something's too good to be true, it probably isn't. And I think everyone's sort of going into the film, or just even from the first sort of 20 minutes or so, knows that something's not quite right, and then they're wondering, okay, what's the twist? What's happening here? And I mean, I've seen several reviews do it, and I purposely made a decision in my written review not to mention any single film which it reminded me of, because in doing so would basically give the game away. There's been certainly 2 or 3 titles which I've seen mentioned, which if you have seen those, you kind of will be immediately knowing where the story goes, and I think that sort of spoils it. I mean, it's nice to find things out by yourself without any sort of premeditation or idea of going into it of what you expect it to be. However, the first 20 minutes for me, I was like, okay, I think I know where this is going. And then very sadly, that is exactly where it ended up going, albeit in a slightly different form. But yes, no, I was a bit disappointed where it went, but we will discuss that. But I guess the other sort of elephant in the room is obviously Mr. Styles. Did a decent job in Dunkirk, but a completely different role. What did you make of Harry Styles in the role of the husband?
I think, unfortunately, Matthew Turner nailed it incredibly well with his headline that most people could only dream of, that it was all style, no substance. I just thought, I'm not one to be too negative and kick someone, but I thought he was pretty awful, to be honest. It was just, there'd be another potential type of film where he would be fine, he would kind of fit in quite well, and that would be his level. But when you're up in and around sort of real powerhouses like Florence Pugh and Chris Pine, it just, every time you just looked at him, you're like, oh, you're just not good enough. And there's often been performances or roles where they fall by the wayside, or there's no problem being that supporting kind of character and actor. But there was just lots of times where I just found him, even though I thought going in he was meant to be American, but then in the reality he is British. But, just that accent seemed to just swerve all the time, and it just felt sort of very quite amateurish. I think, obviously he's kind of, you can't really say that he's built up experience. He's had little minor roles, incredibly minor. I thought he did a lot of really good work in Dunkirk with, in a very much kind of a kind of silent role. Whereas this, it was just like, yeah, he's not put in the experience, and
you're happy to watch him when he doesn't open his mouth.
Yeah, and it's okay to be he is a performer, and he's very good at that. But he's just out of touch with this. It just felt like amateur dramatic style thing, probably by the waterfront or something like that, where it's just a stage play, and he's just trying his best, and it's just, you're watching it going, nah, not, it's unfortunate, really.
I think that's a damning criticism for a British actor to have a wobbly British accent, to not be able to perform it in your own voice properly. That is, Lee, that is
But
harsh.
it's one of these things you see a lot with like young actors almost, where they are, they're British actors and performers, but for some reason, it reminds you when you're at like school and you do those school plays, and a lot of it, everyone sort of puts on like that American affect, to an extent. It's like they're doing that because they think that's how a performer should be, and it's. I think he's almost got that weirdly in his head. I mean, it sounds like there was a lot of one-to-one time that Harry Styles had with his director, but clearly not for picking up acting tips, I think.
Oh, Catty. I think it's. Yeah, I'm not gonna. Yeah, like I said, not gonna kick him completely. Kick him when he's down and stuff like that. I just think it was a case of being miscast more than anything. I think he needed. I think he's an actor. Well, actor slash singer slash performer, etc., etc. Jack of all trades. But I think he's someone who needed to really have built up a few years of these sort of minor sort of supporting roles, like you say, in order to become familiar with the craft, and then sort of go into these lead roles. So go from, was it Dunkirk, to a post-credit sting in a Marvel movie, again saying like one line, to having like two big lead roles in Don't Worry Darling, and then it's My Policeman, which again, from the reviews coming out of Toronto and stuff like that, not the best critiques as well. So yeah, I think he needed to sort of work with sort of smaller films and sort of build up his supporting range before sort of launching into the lead range. But I guess this is a man who, with him, comes box office, I guess, from seeing the Venice red carpet on Don't Worry Darling compared to the very busy red carpet for Bones and All with Timothy Chalamet. Harry Styles fans, they probably outnumbered Chalamet stands by 2-1, and it's gone to the top of the box office in the US and the UK. It had the amount of screenings, whether it was just a very quiet September with not much else going on, or the fact that the distributors seem to double down on the discourse and the hype around the film and put it in for like a blockbuster number of Marvel sort of screenings. Like, it was in my local cinema, it was on every hour for over the opening weekend, and it's like, that is a huge amount for a film which is not, certainly when it was greenlit, would not have been expected to make a huge amount of money. It's made all of its money back in the opening weekend, but I'm going to be very interested to see what kind of lessons Hollywood apparently learns from the success of Don't Worry Darling, and indeed the potential second week drop off. Was it front loaded with Harry Styles fans? Was it people going to see the film because it's the one that they read about in the newspapers and stuff like that? What do you think Hollywood's going to learn? Probably the wrong lessons. Harry Styles greenlit for every single feature.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see his post the policeman kind of career that's going to be kind of coming soon. I think one thing I think is positive, it's made its budget back. It feels like, I think I'd read sort of Warner Brothers only had enough money really in the bank to do this and Black Adam, which is a risky double-hander, I think, for them. But it's always great.
Black Adam's going to change the hierarchy of the DC universe and probably the world.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to drag myself to that one. But I think those are huge positives. It's made its money back one way or another. I mean, the drop-offs are going to happen. I mean, it seems to be, I think next week it's still a relatively quiet week at the cinema. I think in the UK, certainly, it's still on heavy rotation at Cineworld, for example, when I was looking at showtimes the other day. So
I mean, Smile probably will top the box office just because it's a horror film, but I mean, I think it should still be sort of top three by up until certainly the time when sort of Halloween comes out on the 14th, I think.
I think it'll make its money back. I think, unfortunately, it'll just become a film that just gets forgotten about quite quickly. I mean, it's all the big drama just now, but ultimately I think, as a film itself, it just wasn't that engaging or enjoyable. And I think ultimately, as an audience member, I felt ahead of the film the whole time. And, it's not so bad at it's laughable or anything like that. There's a few moments that make you grimace a little bit or eye roll, but it's just a bland, forgettable film. And I've said it for a while, cinemas need the diversity of films. I'm happy there's a film like this that I can go see and go, it wasn't so good. Hopefully there's more films that I can catch in the coming kind of weeks and so on. But it's not a one and done like we've kind of seen in the past few months, where it's like this is going to be a film and it's going to just kick around for weeks and months on an end. This film is going to have a pretty short lifestyle in the grand scheme of things, but I'm going to take that as a sign of sort of cinemas returning to normal, which I hope is a lesson too.
Indeed. And in the US, Don't Worry Darling was at number 1, The Woman King was at number 2, both directed by women. That is obviously a huge win as well in terms of sort of diversity at the box office. What do you see next for Olivia Wilde? Because I think despite all the discourse and stuff like that, I think she clearly has got a lot of talent as a director. Clearly, the issues between herself and Florence Pugh, if there were in fact any, I'm just going by the gossip, it didn't detract from Florence's performance and the direction of the film. I think the main problems of the film ultimately lie in the screenplay. And when you have a weak screenplay and certainly a weak resolution to that screenplay, then you are building on dodgy foundations. And I think Florence is about one of the few things that keeps it all from crashing down completely. But it wasn't until I sort of started doing my review that I realised that the story that was adapted by Katie Silverman, who was the sort of screenwriter on Booksmart, was written by the grandkids of Dick Van Dyke.
Yes, I saw that. So, very funny.
I know. I was like, what? And it's like, but then again, I guess, he was at his peak during the sort of 50s and 60s. So maybe they sort of just chatted to him about what he thought the role of women was meant to be. And they sort of took it from there. But it was like, I think it's the screenplay is ultimately at fault for the overall failure of the film. I think because it just sort of crumbles down at the end. And we're going to go into a sort of spoil section because I'm keen to get your viewpoint on what happens at the end and how it fits in all together. So if you have not seen Don't Worry Darling, pause, go see it. Again, as Lee says, you might not have that long in the cinemas to go see it, so go see it, come back. Are you with us now? Okay, so it turns out that the Victory Project is a virtual reality simulation where the women are stuck in there, but the men go out every day on the driving to work to basically leave to go into the real world, do their job and whatever, and then come back and live in victory with their subservient wives who are basically acting like sort of Mad Men, Stepford Wife type robot, virtual reality slaves, so to speak. And it turns out that Alice's character was a surgeon, a very successful surgeon, but working, 8-hour weeks and stuff like that. And her loser boyfriend, who was unemployed, figured that she would be happier if she was put into this virtual reality world and they could live a better life together. Now, I believe that in order to finance this, he has to go out and work, and he's quite upset about this. So, for me, immediately there's a very dodgy sort of rationale as to why someone would be signing up to do this. This is the virtual reality world is created by the character of Frank, Chris Pine, who's on lots of sort of like, I guess, dark web, Reddit-style forums, sort of indoctrinating all these men into believing that society was essentially better when women were stuck in the kitchen, cooking with Flo, perhaps. I did think that the beginning of the film had a cheeky nod towards that as well. So, when this was revealed, were you A, surprised, and B, what did you think of the effectiveness of the delivery of that reveal?
There was a little bit of surprise about sort of the the context, I guess, that obviously this sort of like incel Reddit, the virtual thing. Reality, but it was very much kind of what I expected. I mean, it's always that classic Garth Marenghi style meme of like, I know writers that use subtext in all cowards. As soon as I heard their name was Alice, I was like, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, this is pretty obvious. I mean, could they not have done a little search and replace on that one? So immediately, just even something like that just tips your hand that, this isn't the kind of real world. And, I sort of suspected it would be something kind of along those lines, sort of, a throwback to, making America great style again to an extent, when people, it's always been coded very much for when people knew their place, not just with race, but with sex as well. And yeah, I thought that was quite interesting as to an extent of like, oh, that's an interesting idea. But, just as a sort of revelation, it was like, I was well ahead of what felt like Florence Pugh in that film. And, with a sort of 2-hour plus movie, you don't want to be sitting there thinking for like nearly 90 minutes of like, come on, get to the point. We know where it's going.
We know where it's going. When's she gonna find out? And it does take a very long time for her to find out. And I mean, I think like you, I was slightly surprised at the delivery of the Victory Project and it being a sort of virtual reality computer simulation, because I was sort of fully expecting it to be, given that they were stuck out in the desert, essentially miles from nowhere, I was expecting some sort of village, I guess, M. Night Shyamalan's The Village type thing, where it's like they're just living in this society. It's modern time, but they are, they're living in this sort of idealistic world that they've created. So the fact it was a computer simulation was a slight surprise, but, it didn't change the fact that I was very disappointed that it was like, oh, that is exactly what they were going for. I kind of had that worked out already. Because, there was films like The Village, Serendipity, the batshit crazy one that has Matthew McConaughey in it. WandaVision was mentioned and stuff like that. Anything with that sort of mention of any of those in a review sort of immediately sort of tips your hat as to where something like that's going, and that it's not real, it's all in our head, etc., or something like that. So it's always disappointing to see people sort of rely on that sort of thing in reviews. I know that there's the quick and easy sort of poster quote or something, Alice in Wonderland meets WandaVision or something like that, but then it gives the game away, and I think that's disappointing to see. So like when it is sort of revealed and she figures out exactly what is going on, I think then we've got the issue of it. Then it just kind of ends very, very quickly. It's like she drives out to this sort of beacon in the middle of the desert and puts her hands on it, and then is able to exit the program. Essentially, we get sort of quick minor reveals. Frank's wife kills him. Again, not really sure the reason of that. Olivia Wilde's character of Bunny is like she always knew that it was fake, but she was wanting to stay in there because her kids had died in the real life, and here she gets to be with the kids and stuff. All that kind of stuff is sort of rushed through in about 10 minutes, and then I think I'd seen a tweet sort of saying that you'd heard it ended on a cliffhanger. I'm not sure if it really does. It's sort of like she sort of, I think, because in the end it's basically she wakes up, but then that's it. I guess you're left to ponder what she does with her life after she wakes up out of this computer simulation, because certainly not all the men are going to, because apparently if you die in the simulation, you die in real life. Similar, I guess, to Freddy Krueger and his killing people in Nightmares, in A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, I think a huge part of the fault of the film is the fact that it rushes through all these sort of complex sort of reveals and stuff in no time at all, and it doesn't really explore sort of reasoning and stuff behind it beyond like, oh, once again it's the aren't men awful sort of thing that we get towards the very end of Men, and I think Last Night in Soho and several other films. There's certainly not the cathartic sort of moment there that Florence Pugh gets with her boyfriend in Midsummer, perhaps.
No, I thought she was really going to go to town on all those men in that kind of final sort of few minutes where she comes out the house covered in blood. I was
Grand Theft Auto style, knocking them all over.
That's kind of what I was hoping for. I was like, lean into the absurdity.
Runs back over them.
Yeah, instead it was just sort of a very boring car chase. So yeah, it just there was decisions where it felt like it could have gone, lean into something a little bit more wild and original. It just sort of just never kind of broke free from there.
Don't Worry Darling, definitely one to to check out. Try to go in, obviously ignoring the spoiler special part of the podcast. Try to go in as blank as you can, and you might get something of it, but unfortunately, it is a film which kind of doesn't necessarily tip its hand too early. It keeps its cards close to its chest. However, it's got such a bad poker face that you can kind of tell what they're holding straight away. It's quite a good analogy. Why didn't I use that in my review? I should go back and edit it.
Yes, as certain film websites are doing these days, aren't they?
Oh, yes. No, I stand by my decisions, and if I got something wrong, I would admit it, but I wouldn't, take down someone else's opinion that had been written on a website. I thought that was incredibly poor form. But we have been. It's been a busy week at the cinema. Avatar is back and taking more money worldwide than Don't Worry, Darling. But it could get up to $3 billion worldwide in the end. Not bad for a film which apparently has no cultural significance, according to other people. There's always a discourse, and apparently its Avatar was always crap, and no one ever really liked it, despite the fact that it's the highest-grossing film ever made. Who knows? But one film which has tapped into a certain element of the musical and filmic zeitgeist is Moonage Daydream. So a cinematic odyssey exploring David Bowie's creative and musical journey from the visionary filmmaker Brett Morgan, and most importantly, sanctioned by the Bowie estate and family. Unlike, was it called Stardust, that starred
Johnny Flynn,
Johnny Flynn as a young boy heading out to America for the first time, which was not allowed to use any of David Bowie's music. Talk about writing yourself into a corner with that one. So, I saw this one at the Belmont, pretty much a packed house in Cinema 3, the smaller screen, but still nice to see that it was a packed audience for that one. I believe it had been on IMAX screens the week before. I think that would have been quite something to see.
It was.
I take it, did you see it on IMAX?
I did. I went to see it the week early preview on IMAX, and I was so glad I did. I went there and it felt like very much like a BBC Six Music listeners away day. I remember booking my ticket a few days earlier, and it was only like sort of a handful of people, and I thought, oh, that's a bit disappointing. But perhaps it's something to say about sort of older, kind of audience members where they're like, yeah, we're just going to go to the cinema and book at the weekend, or sort of just on the sort of come up on the day. So it proved to be a really busy Sunday afternoon screening for me, and I saw it as part of a double bill with Skyfall, so it was very much a best of British style kind of afternoon, and it was just an incredible experience. I'd seen Avatar in IMAX 3D, back in the day, and I just don't have the time just now, so I'm not in a rush to revisit that one again. If I had the time, I might have been tempted, but it was just an incredible IMAX experience to hear a lot of those David Bowie songs coming through IMAX speakers, and some of the way that some of the music had been kind of twisted and screwed was really impressive. And it was just sort of I found it to be quite an emotional experience. I was chatting about it with one of my friends who was a big Bowie fan as well, and he went to see it in IMAX, and there's just almost an element where you go on this journey of this just incredible musician, rock star and performer, someone that could do acting as well as he could do performing. Take note, Harry Styles. And what I thought was particularly impressive was, like, as it got towards the end and Bowie's inevitable death, was like, I found myself quite emotional just thinking, I really hope they don't show his death, and or kind of lean into that sad story. And it's been a while since I've watched a film, and knowing what's going to come has provoked that type of reaction. There was a real sadness to the end of that movie, but you come away just thinking, like, what an incredible body of work that he's left behind, and just all of this archive footage, music that they've combined together in this amazing work. I was just absolutely blown away.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. I'm a huge Bowie fan. Were you? How big a Bowie fan are you actually? Are you just like a casual Bowie fan, or have you got, like, Was he like a important musical influence? Just intrigued to get.
I love Bowie. It's one of those things. There's still huge sections of his work that I've just never got round to diving into. But I really admire him and love him as a person and a musician. So I feel like I've definitely got an emotional attachment to him, that in a way that even a lot of music I like, I'm not attached to the artist. And I was just really, it was I remember being very sad when he kind of passed away, and going into this film I knew it would be sort of what would be akin to perhaps like a quote unquote religious experience to kind of see it like this, because I'd never seen him live. Obviously I just very much missed that generation, and this is the closest I'll get to that, I think.
Yeah, because I think for me, I mean, I didn't know a huge amount about the film going in. I knew, it was like people have been raving about it since Cannes. It was like you should see it on the biggest screen possible, etc. But I don't know. In my head, I don't know. I was potentially expecting something more akin to your sort of standard documentary of, people talking about Bowie and his impact and his influence and stuff like that. And this wasn't it. This was as, I guess, individual and unconventional a sort of documentary as the man himself was. And it is just a sort of meditation on Bowie. It sort of goes, like I say, it covers his whole sort of musical career, plays all the hits, but does it in a way with using using archive footage and footage from other sort of things. I'm pretty sure I saw a couple of clips of like Event Horizon in, I think, like the montage for like Spaceboy and stuff like that. But it's just clear what an incredible, not just, musical artist he was, but an incredible person, how sort of ahead of the times he was. He was, talking about, sort of, gender neutrality, bisexuality and stuff in the 70s and stuff like that. And, there's people still arguing about all that stuff now, sort of 30, 40 years on. And, the fact that he was, like, able to sort of do acting and, very, very well. I'd forgotten the fact that he did Elephant Man on Broadway and did it without makeup. So it was just him. And it's like, that is an incredibly risky thing to do. Like, when you're known primarily for being a music performer, to do that kind of thing as well. There was a tiny clip of Labyrinth, sadly no Dance Magic Dance, but I'll forgive them for that one. I think all the Best of Bowie albums that I've seen that don't include any Labyrinth songs on, I'm like, ooh, is it then the Best of Bowie? I don't know. But I mean, I did, like, and it was like just sort of seeing stuff which I'd never seen before as well, like the footage of him sort of walking around. I think he's either sort of Bangkok or Vietnam or something like that, and he's got like the bleach blonde hair and this black overcoat, and it's like it's clearly what I, as a Blade Runner fan, had never noticed before. That clearly seemed to be like a visual influence on the look of Rutger Hauer's Roy Batty. In Blade Runner, he's got the same hair and the same sort of coat and stuff like that, and so I was like, wow, it's like he did so much, and you can still see his influences in sort of everyone, even sort of Harry Styles, clearly sort of fashions some of his outfits and stuff after Bowie's, clearly still inspiring new generations. And I think this kind of film is gonna be like you say, a religious experience for diehard Bowie fans. But I think you can go see it without any real knowledge about it and come away, I think, and immediately be going on Spotify or heading down the local record shop and getting some vinyls and stuff like that. Fantastic experience. And if you haven't seen it yet, I believe it's still on in sort of Independence this week, and some Cineworlds for the next couple of weeks. Only maybe sort of one showing a day, but if you can carve out the time, then it's definitely highly recommended.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely go. I'm to this. If I had the time, I'd certainly be considering seeing it again. That's
all the movies we've seen for this week. Coming up next, I'm not entirely sure at this point in time. I think we have a flurry of activity at the box office now, kind of going a little bit quiet again until the inevitable hierarchy change in the DC universe with Black Adam on October 21st, August, but there'll be the London Film Festival. So yes, you're going down for a bit of it now.
Yeah,
I believe you've cancelled a few days.
Yeah, I'm down for work in London on the Thursday, and then I've taken a day off before coming back home. The joy of probably having my train return ticket expensed, so I'll be coming back. I'm going to go see 3 films on the Friday. I'm going to see White Noise. I'm going to go see the new Noah Baumbach movie. I'm going to see the new Johanna Hogg A24 film. I'm going to see the new Florence Pugh film that day, and then back again sort of Monday afternoon, and then sort of just see a few films on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before coming back. It's a very lopsided press schedule that they've got this year. So yeah, I'm going to come back up the road. I'm going to go see Decision to Leave in Edinburgh and Knives Out in Edinburgh, where I'll see you.
Actually, you won't, because I'm going to be in Glasgow.
I will see you from the other side of the M8.
Indeed, yes, in the Central Belt, because Aberdeen doesn't get these screenings. But yeah, no, I figured there's going to be the press day, so I figured I'm going down and to watch Knives Out, Glass Onion, and then I'll do the press day, which I am hopeful, fingers crossed. Black Adam is a big question mark, but I'm thinking they should get Banshees of Inisherin and Decision to Leave at least. So yeah, and I have got my virtual access pass for the London Film Festival, which out of 164 titles has 32 feature films, and of them, nothing that I'd actually heard of before. So I guess I'm going to have to dive into that situation of just finding the next, hidden gem, and hopefully there's something that I'll find worthwhile, and I can start shouting about and inevitably still not feature on the poster. Like After Sun, 2 quotes from IndieFire. Where's my 5-star review? A24? I'll have to hope for more from Mubi. Excellent. But we'll be back, no doubt, in the next week or so with more stuff. But don't forget to check out the A24 project. We've had a run of our interview specials. We've had Owen Klein, we've had Kokonada and Just H. Min, and we've got a Rami special coming, dropping on Friday to coincide with the release of season 3, which is on Netflix? Hulu, is it? Will be a few more episodes of the A24 project to come once Lee has managed to catch up on some of the films which I've also seen, such as The Whale, etc. So, there'll be lots to come before Christmas. We'll be dining well. Excellent. So, we'll see you then. But until then, keep calm and carry on. And ultimately, don't worry, darling. It's all going to be fine.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.